Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second council of the year. My name is Harris Cressy. I'm a chair of council. Made sure to remember to say that because I didn't say my name last time, so now I've done that. That's good. NUSU Students' Council is using a hybrid meeting technology to allow remote attendees, in addition to being broadcast live on NUTV. Those of you who were present last meeting will remember what I am describing as the pilot run-through of this. So you may remember a whole load of technical issues. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone who was at that last meeting for their patience during that time, as hopefully because of that we've been able to stamp out most of the bugs, and I look forward to a much more fluidly run council. Just before I go on to explain for both new and existing members how council will run with this hybrid thing in process, just want to bring up that as per the risk assessment for how council is run, it is strongly recommended that you wear some form of facial PPE when you're not eating, but that is up to you. And additionally, and I'll remind you all this at the end of council, due to the quick turnaround before the December council, the deadline for motions is 10 a.m. this Friday. So if you want to use your student voice to hopefully make some changes within the union and want to do so before the next semester, that is the time for you to get it in. So just a very brief explanation of how you contribute to student council, again for both new and existing members. In addition to the information that's both present virtually in the chat, and you also find on the chairs around you. I also encourage councillors in advance of future meetings to also be familiar with the standing orders of NUSU Council, which is on the website. That gives you much more in-depth explanation of how council works, and that's obviously helpful. But just in terms of a brief kind of overview. So for those of you who are present in the room, you'll need to make sure you are a participant of a Teams meeting and can access the chat, but only the chat, not the actual call. If you're present in the room and you are not in that position where you can access the chat, or you don't think you are, you can just raise your hand now, and that will come along and help you resolve that. Those of you who are online should already be able to access the chat through the call. So during student council, as is normally the case, attendees may only speak from the floor with a raise of their hand. To allow for equal access from this point onwards, that will be a virtual raising of the hand by typing your desire to speak into the chat. The additional benefit to me as chair of this is I will also know for what reason you wish to speak and prioritise you appropriately. So from this point onwards, if you place your hands up physically in the room, that will be assumed to be because you're having a technical issue. For Nat's attention, I will not assume that is you wishing to speak. Virtual attendees should also note that whilst the technology that's been implemented is hopefully here to provide as much of equal access as possible, there is obviously always a possibility of tech issues either on our end or yours, and that may impact your ability to contribute. That's just an unfortunate risk through having a virtual attendance. It's still the best kind of access you could possibly have to this meeting and as equal as possible. If there are tech issues, unfortunately, we can't wait and stall a meeting. We'll just have to move on. So the cheat sheet that is present on the screen, in the chat, and on the papers around you indicate the only acceptable ways to speak. When it comes to relevant times, I'll also re-explain the relevant codes to type. But just failing everything else, there's two key ones which you should keep in mind. Those are the ones you can express at any point in the meeting from now until the end. And those are points of orders and procedural motions. And the most important ones are on the cheat sheet. So I won't explain them all in detail, but the kind of biggest one is POC, for point of clarity. This is to ask how something works in council. So if you want to contribute and you're not sure how to do it right, just type in the chat POC. I will invite you to ask a question. I will explain to you what the process is. So if everything I've said is good, is feeling like words and not making sense, that's fair enough. It's a lot to take in. just type PLC and say, how do I do such and such? And I'll happily explain to you. It's all a learning process. Please don't use the point of clarification vote to ask a question to a member of council. That's not what it's for. That's what the letter Q is for. A point of information is to offer at any point during the procedure of council a neutral point of fact, usually to correct a factual mistake you've heard someone else made. And finally, type PM if you want to submit a procedural motion. The most common usage of this, to keep in mind, is if you want to procedurally amend a motion that's being discussed. So type in PM amendment and what you want to change it to. The cheat sheet has an example. There are other codes, but I'll go on to that when we reach the debate section of council. So hopefully with all that explanation out of the way, we can move to the second order of business. So this is to approve the minutes of the previous council. So if anyone has any objections or follow-up questions from the last meeting, can you please type an A into the chat if you have an objection, or a Q into the chat if you have a question. If I don't receive any of those, I will assume that the minutes are passed. I will give you 10 seconds to do that. I also have a very loud timer now, so you're going to hear that beep a lot. Amazing. So the minutes from the last meeting, like I said, passed. So I should probably actually grab the right order paper. We're now going to move on to the election of vacant councillor positions. And for this, we have the marginalised genders officer role. So the marginalised genders officer is responsible for ensuring that issues concerning discrimination against marginalised genders are accurately represented within the Students' Union and the university. They will also work closely with the other liberation officers and the NUSU Welfare and Equality Officer to provide representation, advice and awareness to those who are affected by gender discrimination. Any candidate who self-defines, or rather any member of NUSU who self-defines as being from a marginalised gender and who will be studying at Newcastle University throughout this academic year, put them forward as a candidate. You may also put yourself forward with another person as a job share candidate. So if anyone wishes to nominate themselves for a role, if you can place your name into the chat, as well as the role you're wanting to go for, and then we will proceed. I will give people about 20 seconds to consider, and we'll move on from there. Okay, we have a single nomination for Nathan Hartley for the marginalised gender officer role, but nomination has come through from someone else, but I assume that person's in the room. Grand. So this candidate would be deemed elected as the role of marginalised gender officer unless there are any objections. So I will give members of council 10 seconds to type an A into the chat if you wish to raise an objection to this candidacy. Not received any objections, so congratulations, you're elected as the manager. Yes. Nathan, if you want to come forward and speak to Angela, they'll make sure that you've got a voting place for this council as you're now in the role. Feel free to come forward at any point. Okay, so we move on to the reports now, and these will be passed via an absence of objections. So if anyone would like to object to a steering committee report, you have 10 seconds to type an A into the chat. Cool, that's passed. The next one is the disciplinary committee and scrutiny committee report. Similarly, 10 seconds to type an A to object in the chat. That's passed. And with any luck, if the tech has held firm, it's my pleasure to invite remotely Abby to the virtual podium to give their State of the Union report.
Brilliant, thank you, Harris. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so I'm really sorry that I'm not there in person today, everyone. I'm not feeling too great, but you get me on the big screen, so that's just as good. So this would have worked better in person, but I actually wanted to start off by asking how everyone is doing. At our first officer exec this month, we discussed student mood at the moment, and that many of us are struggling. From all of us as a team, we want you to know that if you are having ed with your well-being at the moment or living with poor mental health, you are not alone. Mental health is just as important as physical, so please be kind to both yourself and others in this time, knowing that this too will pass and we are here if you need us. On this well-being note, we are constantly, as a team, making sure the university understands the severity of the change that you're going through at the moment as you now learn on campus, and making sure that they're committed to maintaining the aspects of the safety net from last year that they said they would continue to mitigate any circumstances. So this leads on to work that I've been up to this month. I sat on the first student mental health chartered steering group, and the aim of this group is to achieve an accreditation from Student Mind to implement mental well-being into all of the work the university do. I have to say, for a university meeting, I was impressed by the pace of this, and as all of the staffs are also involved in the work stream, and we are all very excited about the meaningful change that we think we can create here. I have also continued work with the advancement team, so the fundraising team, to raise money for the student fund. This was a fund that was gifted by alumni in the name of student experience during the pandemic, and it's my hope that by sort of going along to those meetings, we'll be able to make more changes and mitigate circumstances from a social, financial perspective. I have also been working with the university on sexual violence prevention by planning our Changing the Cultures meetings for the year, with the intent to action improvement on inductions, especially on consent and bystander training. We also intend to work in detail on the student charter and disciplinary procedures to make sure that it reflects the values of our diverse community. Within the wider community, I have begun work looking at the future shape of the city of Newcastle with the Northumbria president, and we look forward to getting students involved across the city in these conversations. At NUSU, we are also keen to help with the work It Happens Here on the Misogyny is a Hate Crime campaign, and attended a discussion at the Women's West End Centre to collaborate on the implementation of this responsibly within Newcastle, which we have also seen happen in cities such as Nottingham. So that was very exciting. We look forward to working together on that. I also attended the University Finance Committee. It wasn't actually called that, but I couldn't remember exactly what it was called. I urged the university to look at the financial perspective for students, particularly as this meeting coincided with announcements on the national budget in general, considering sort of some of the fear around what the national budget might mean for students and student loans. We have urged university to use its influence in the area of student loans and work to make a more equitable loan system. It's a big ask, but the VC has followed up on this with a request for a further meeting. Anyway, back to the fun stuff. Let's start with the career. We've got a print issue out at last, I quote George, resolving numerous persistent technical issues to get a team of 50 volunteers standby were able to do their jobs. So thank you very much to the media team. Another exciting aspect, Eleanor and I have also held trials for University Challenge. We had a record turnout and are so excited to get the team together, hopefully by the end of this week. A huge shout out for Eleanor for her work on this and to the student community for their patience with us pronouncing the questions. Eleanor has also started planning the postgraduate campaign for Fed. Lots of fun postgraduate specific activities to bring the community together, focusing on well-being and mental health and how difficult being a postgrad can be. So she's thinking CBT workshops, relaxed coffee mornings, well-being activities in collaboration with Give It a Go, and also sports, which all sounds fab. Eleanor has also been representing PGs in meetings, and at the end of this month, we'll be planning discussion on PGRs as staff or students issue, with a view to get student input on this at the start of next term and then put actions in place. For Liv, our education officer, regular meetings with deans of education and academic registrar continue as they address the work that's needed on overhauling how we support our students with extenuating circumstances. She has some intense work ahead of Christmas to ensure real, tangible change is made by the next academic year, and we'll be looking for potential student feedback and involvement in this work in the new term. She's also been having a lot of fun ensuring that the library allows students to rent out headphones again for 24 hours and use them anywhere on campus, not just in the library. Eleanor and Liv have now had 3 meetings with their education exec, which have been invaluable, so shout out to the education exec. The reps of the different schools have really shaped much of the work that they've been doing since the last council. This has included continuing to push out the PEC review form and reminding the uni on the need to change the culture around PEC submissions. They've also tried to ensure that our students have space on campus to do online lectures and meetings, and they've also reached out to the relevant teams at the university to work to ensure they have all the spaces that students need. Academic note, it is worth bringing to the council's attention that Eleanor, Liv, Bree and I sat on University Senate last week. It's an important meeting, which is mainly with academics, and we discussed the shape of the academic year. We might be bringing this to council at a later date as there was a considerable amount of tension. Basically, issues with timetabling for resits this summer means that at some point in the year we need to lose a week, and this will be a permanent change. So we might need to consult council on those options, as Senate was quite heated, but no, we were all representing students and speaking very loudly. Speaking of Bree, she has finished Black History Month and had really great feedback, and is now working with the Race Equality Trust to gather student feedback on progress since Black Lives Matter and make a new plan of action. Brianna and I were also delegates this month for Newcastle at COP26 and had access to the Blue Zone. The main takeaway here is that we had a pizza with the Minister of Tonga. But no, it's obviously not. The main focal point here for Newcastle was youth empowerment, eco-anxiety, and seeing this as a global intersectional issue. We've brought back lots of ideas from this, which are going to feature in a campaign later on this year. In the meantime, you can check out an article by Elizabeth Mead, our Ethics and Environment Officer. In the Chronicle this year, she came along to the Green Zone with us. Sorry, did I mention their first hard print as a team is now ready for you to pick up on campus. Speaking of news, what has Fergus been up to in sport, you might ask? It's great to see that we currently sit 9th overall on the Bucks table. Woohoo! And that standing achievement this early on in the season. Fergus has delivered dangerous behaviour that will make the City Council take student housing seriously, and he will be leading on this next term. In terms of society, Harris is pleased to say that things are now in full flow and we have resumed pre-pandemic engagement with feedback from society that they are very happy with the number of members they have this year. They are also having great events and engagement is high. The first special grant application was also completed for Class Council with about £11,000 given out to societies, and Harris has already started planning for the refreshers fair. It never stops. And additional training for the committee, which will be done in January. It's also worth drawing attention to the fact that Harris has been doing extensive work with the International Office and was invited to a 2-week-long extensive Agile Sprint, a joint project with an external consultancy and the university to understand the journey of international students. After 2 weeks of interviewing international students, first at the workshop and then at pop-ups, and they've identified the main points throughout the international students' journey that they would like to work on, including from applying for the visa to the first month of teaching on campus. So there's now a detailed map of the journey ahead, and Harris is very excited to continue on this work. And I want to talk about spiking as a separate item, as it has been a NUSU-wide effort, and we are so proud of all of our clubs and society who participated in the big night in last month. Since then, Liv, Fergus and Bree have been weekly meetings with the police, licensing team, local council, our health and wellbeing team and Northumbria SU. There have been concerns from who they will be able to speak to on a night out, especially for those who may feel unable to speak to the police or security guards. And they're very much urging local authorities to take an intersectional approach to this and really overhaul the way they approach the issue of spiking in the city. We do feel this isn't reflected in the city currently, given that these meetings have now finished, and from what we've heard from students that's going on at the moment. So know that Bree and I will be making demands to city councillors tomorrow alongside Northumbria University, as you deserve to be heard and be fundamentally safe in the city. Finally, finishing on some absolutely wholesome content with the magic of the holiday season coming up, I want to end by bringing attention to the NUSU fundraising events at the moment, one of which is a chocolate advent calendar collection for Kids Cabin, who support children from disadvantaged backgrounds to play positive roles in their community. We're collecting those from now until the 30th of November, so if you pick up an advent calendar for yourself, please think of them. There is also a 12 Days of Christmas reverse advent calendar collection. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's for the West End Food Bank. So you can get involved with that. And Crisis at Christmas will be collecting essential items such as toiletries, jumpers, coats, socks, anything you can manage to help with people who will be homeless this Christmas. Nest are also collecting those donations. That is all. Thank you for your patience. Good night.
Thank you very much, Abby. So, again, through a process of an absence of objections, I'll give people 10 seconds to object to the State of Union report, otherwise it will be deemed passed. That's passed. And on that, I would like to invite the sabbatical officers to please stand on the line behind the podium for questions and mandates. If you would just like to introduce yourselves as well, that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Eleanor. I'm the postgraduate officer. I'm Lydia. I'm the education officer.
I'm Fergus, the athletics union officer. Harrison, I'm the activities officer.
I'm Brianna, and I'm the welfare and equality officer.
Good evening, everyone. I'm George, and I'm the editor of the Courier.
Thank you. If anyone has any questions, please could you type a Q into the chat, and I will invite you to pose it in the order I see it gets typed into the chat. I'll give we'll wait about 20 seconds for questions to come through, otherwise I'll assume we're on 15 seconds. Maybe I should time people on how long it takes me to have a mouthful of pizza. Maybe that's a more fair way to go about it. Okay, well, I assume there's no questions, so thank you, everyone. The next item on the agenda are the officer reports and executive committee minutes. These will all be passed in a block, the same fashion as before. So you all have 10 seconds to type an A to object to those, otherwise they'll be deemed as passed. Okay, there's a pass. And then we get to move on to promotions. Yeah. Right, okay, so the first motion is motion 401, ordinary motion to mandate Spartak officers to investigate Newcastle University's hiring practice and for the creation of a NUSU modern slavery policy. I'd like to invite Alex Walker to the podium to present the motion. Once you're ready, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Harris. I'm going to power through this because, as you can tell, there's quite a lot. So for some context, I'll just briefly outline. The Chinese state is persecuting a genocide in Western China. And Dr. Jo Smith-Finlay, an academic here, notable for her research into Western China, has recently been sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party. That was national news. At Newcastle, there exists what is called a Confucius Institute. And these are units of academics sent from China, often from a partner university, in our case, Xiamen University. I think I pronounced that right. Some academics in these units are chosen by a Chinese government department and become university staff. Given the activities of the Chinese government, that would be in breach of our discrimination laws, and available sources show that CI units have encouraged such discrimination in their dealings. All CI units were removed recently from Canada and many other universities from Japan, France, Germany, Belgium and America, because these practices have been called by human rights lawyers unethical and illegal in the free world. So there are essentially 3 parts to this motion. Firstly is the writing of a NUSU modern slavery policy. If one's already been written, it needs to be linked at the bottom of the NUSU website. Secondly, the union needs to condemn the sanction placed on Dr. Joanne Smith-Finlay. They are absolutely despicable for the CCP to condemn someone for criticising the CCP for genocide. And finally, for our union to submit a freedom of information request to the university, very easy to do, to try and uncover the exact nature of hiring processes of Newcastle University in China, specifically through the Confucius Institute. This FOI is detailed in the motion, we've already written it. And the motion seeks to uncover aspects of the contract between Chinese government agencies, namely Hanban and Newcastle University. This is in order to gain an understanding of whether our university has taken steps to ensure the legality of its hiring practices and their consistency with UK law. I trust the members of this council. Nearly got there.
Thanks to the podium. If anyone has any questions for the proposer, please could you type a Q into the chat. You can also continue to type in Qs either one into the debating part of the motion if any questions arise later on. I'd like to invite Livia to ask a question. This David and Jack will come to you.
I just wanted more of a point of clarity, really, just to double check. So, what you wanted us to do is to ask the uni for this freedom of information request and just make sure that we are abiding by what is by human rights laws in the UK.
Yeah,
Right.
So
That's
the concern
brill.
is that these Confucius institutes have an incredibly dodgy record. We know that they have been influencing hiring practices that are in breach of the laws of other countries. If they've been doing the same thing in this country, that's in breach of our laws. So if the university have been doing that, it's very, very wrong. Because the CI in this country, when it's based at Newcastle University, is the university. So that's essentially the point of the FOI.
George Wood.
several universities have decided to terminate their Confucian Institute contracts.
Yeah.
Would it not be more effective to try and lobby the university to do that here? And most of the universities you've picked, that you've listed here, in fact all of them, are foreign universities. So possibly it would be a good stance for Newcastle to take sort of a interest for the UK there.
I don't think that the university would just listen to us and get rid of the Confucius Institute if we asked the council to do that. I don't think we've got the basis to do that yet. I think we need the FOI request so we know exactly what has been done, and if the university is in breach of British laws through the Confucius Institute, then of course my immediate response would be to say that we should lobby the university to remove the CI Institute. But I think we need to know exactly what's gone on first, and we need the FOI to understand that.
Sorry, am I?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I was saying it seems that obviously that it's important to understand whether the university has been following these the correct practices and everything like that. But it seems to me that it's sort of outlining problems caused by the Confucius Institute here, but not necessarily attacking that problem. It's sort of attacking the university for their handling.
I don't see that we haven't listed any problems caused by the Confucius Institute here because we don't know of any problems caused by the Confucius Institute here. We know of problems caused by the Confucius Institute at McMaster's University is one of the big ones, and several other universities, several in Japan. University of Chicago is a big one. Penn State in America, Ivy League University. We know they've got rid of them. We know that McMaster's they were doing some very dodgy stuff, but we don't know what's going on at this university, and that's the point of the FOI request.
Seeing no further questions, so thank you, Alex. Okay, so onwards, if you wish to speak against the motion, please type an A into the chat. If you wish to speak for the motion, please type an F into the chat, and I will go down the list as I see the names. I'm seeing no request to speak against or for the motion, so in which case we can move to a vote. System's ready. I have no recollection of a closing statement ever either, so I don't think that's okay, so thank you. Yeah, so, yeah, just as the first vote of the day, is everyone, if you're not on Ombia, if in the room physically, please raise your hands and if you need assistance. If you're remotely struggling, please, I guess, if you're having issues, type it into the chat, but the link should have been distributed both onto the Teams channel and I believe via email. I'll give people about half a minute just because I'm aware to switch over to the browser. The link's also been posted into the chat as well for your reminder. For Bra on beer. What does Ra stand for? Do we know? Makes sense. Okay, I'm going to assume everyone's happy and on beer, so if we could open the voting please, and you have approximately half a minute to vote in.
What's the session ID?
Session ID. If you raise your hand up, someone will come over here. Do you have a session ID? Place your hand up and someone will come. Okay, that's voting closed. That motion has passed. Okay, that's not the percentages that stand by. Fergus, is your question about the motion?
No, it's all right, actually, sorry. I'm all right.
No worries. That's passed. Congratulations, the motion's passed. Okay, so we move on to motion 4.2 on the Queen's Green Canopy. I'd like to invite Elliot Kirkpatrick to the podium to present the motion. Whenever you're ready, you've got 2 minutes.
Well, this is fairly straightforward. So next year is the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which will mark 70 years of her being on the throne. As part of this, she's announced a green canopy, which is like a sort of tree planting exercise where she wants educational institutes, businesses, or even individuals across the UK to plant a tree to commemorate her reign, which I think is quite a nice touch to do. We should be planting trees anyway, so it's a nice excuse for the union to do this. So this motion will basically just mandate the union to ask the estates team of the university to see where we could plant a tree, where would be appropriate, and then to see if we'll get them to report back at the next council and see where we're at. I think that's all really. There isn't really much else to say on the matter. If anyone's got any questions.
So as before, type Q into the chat if you have any questions. I'd like to invite George Wood to start us off once the microphone reaches you.
Yeah, so really nice motion, completely agree. It just strikes me that a university of over 28,000 students should be planting 1 tree. Can we not do better than that?
Well, I suppose we could. If anybody else wants to plant a tree, they're more than welcome to. But this is as part of like a specific scheme that the Queen's launched. You get like a sort of nice little plaque stick on it as well, to sort of say where it is. But yeah, I mean, the next council we could easily just plant another tree, or we could plant as many trees as we want. Yeah, so like I said, it's a nice touch.
Lizzie Mead. I should have also said earlier, if you're able to stand, please do whilst you speak, just so everyone can visually see you as well.
So I think planting trees is a very good idea. However, shouldn't we be planting trees for their own sake? I mean, I think that would attract more supporters, given that the Queen can be a polarizing figure like any other celebrity or political figure. And I'm thinking if we were just planting trees for its own sake, that might get more supporters. That's all. So why for this event and why now?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Queen, obviously, not everybody, she isn't universally liked, but opinion polls recently have shown that a majority of every age category, including our age category, so presumably a majority of people at the university, do support the Queen. Whether you believe in the institution of monarchy or not, I think this is sort of a personal thanks to the Queen as the head of state. Like I said, 70 years, and whether you agree with the fact that she she's inherited the role or not, she's certainly put a lot of effort into it over that time. And she's done a lot of good here and across the Commonwealth as well. Over 50 countries, 2 billion people in the Commonwealth that she's worked on behalf of. So I think this is really a personal touch for Elizabeth II personally. You know, it's her jubilee at the end of the day.
Thank you. I see no further questions, so thank you, Elliot.
All right.
I'd like to, as well as keeping the floor open for further questions, if any do arise, I'd like to open the floor for any against or for speakers. Please type an A or an F into the chat if you wish to speak against or for the motion. To kick us off, I'd like to invite Owen, who I believe is on virtually, to speak against the motion. If you could just hold on, Owen, I think we're just needing to unmute the laptop. We can't hear you yet. Just give us 2 minutes. Everyone just bear with us 1 second, we're having a slight speaker issue. Hmm?
They never linked the computers into Megatron. So that's how we have to pick up the audio from the computers.
I mean, is that where it's coming out from?
I think so, unless it's coming in from somewhere else.
Is it coming? Is that? Are people in the chat still able to hear us? Connor.
Coming through the caption. Yes.
Owen, would you be happy with me allowing Livia to go first and then you'll be the second against speaker? Okay, Livia, would you like to come to the podium and whilst the audio issues are being sorted out, you have 2 minutes to raise your point against.
So I just take issue with the statement that the monarchy has done nothing but good for the UK and the Commonwealth. I think many people who've lived in Commonwealth would take a lot of issue with that, considering the monarchy and their ancestors and what they stand upon have pillaged, killed and destroyed the land of multiple places and multiple countries. And while I'm not saying that the Queen herself personally went to all these countries and did it, she stands upon and represents a group of people, her ancestors have done it, and by celebrating her reign, and it goes against everything we're doing as a union and a uni to decolonise the curriculum, to decolonise our university. It goes against everything. there is systemic problems of historic racism within the monarchy that they have never apologised for. They've never apologised for their role in the slave trade. They've never apologised for their role in imperialism. The Queen's often heralded as a liberator, as the one who relinquished her political control over the colonies. However, as opposed to her role where she continued to ensure that the destabilisation of multiple colonial economies continued under her watch, she is celebrated and heralded for this. And I'm not saying I've got out against her personally. I'm sure she's nice, but at the end of the day, by putting this tree, a tree's great, but doing it for the role of the monarchy, it reinforces the message that the Queen isn't responsible for her ancestors' actions, and thus reparations don't need to be repaid for all the stolen artefacts and the multiple things that have gone in the past. So, as somebody, that's so much effort of mine now in this time, there's so much money from the uni to decolonise and make this a safe and not racist campus. I don't oppose planting a tree, I oppose planting the tree on the basis of celebrating a racist institution.
Thank you. Alex Walker, you've got a point of information you'd like to make?
Yeah, the question was the Commonwealth rather than the Empire. I don't think the Commonwealth has. I don't think the Commonwealth has pillaged anywhere. The Commonwealth was set up after the Second World War, and was a vehicle towards world peace and a moving away from empire, and that was always part of the Commonwealth, to move away from the imperial past because it was wrong. So I don't think you could say the Empire and the Commonwealth are the same.
Elliot, you have a point of information?
Yes, I'd just like to respond if that's okay. It's just...
Sorry, when you say responding, are you raising a factual, neutral...
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Okay.
Black and usual.
A brief one, please, as well.
I think really the point about the imperialism, I think actually the Queen in that regard has, what she's done is she inherited an empire, she transformed it, and it's changed obviously into a commonwealth of independent member states, which is still the head of.
Transformation is not
well, the point of information I'd like to raise primarily is that...
Sorry, do that. Thank you. Do we have sound again? Okay. I'd like to invite William Hayes up to speak for the motion.
Did you want sound?
Yes, but it's against, so Owen will be on next.
Just stop, thanks. I never knew that a tree could be so contentious. But, at the end of the day, I think there's been a lot of strong arguments. I mean, it's a tree, that's positive. If this kind of campaign can be passed by NUSU, maybe others of equivalent outcome could also. I think, one, it's holistically valuable. Trees are nice, people like trees, better than replacing it with something... Well, better than putting something ugly in its stead, like, the clasp, which we thankfully got rid of. That was an eyesore. Trees are objectively pretty. Nature is beautiful. Secondly, I think, the points made about not honouring the Queen are slightly extreme. This is history, and I think the monarchy has done bad and good. And it's perfectly okay to celebrate the good in a relatively small way. It's not much of an ask, and I think it's a positive thing overall. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Owen, if you'd like to speak against the motion, 2 minutes. Okay, just hold on 1 second. I can hear you, but the gain is very low. Owen, can you just say something that's not relevant to your point, just so we can do a sound test? Can somebody else on the Teams call just say something really quick, just to make sure it's our side and not on Owen's side? No, it was lower. I heard you, Abby, but very quietly, so it's the same issue. Owen, would you mind terribly if I move you to the third against speaker? I think we have enough people to balance it out regardless.
Sure thing. Could I possibly write like 2 sentences with a brief?
No, I'd prefer if it was the same, if it was verbal as everyone else has been. But hopefully by the time we get to the next against speaker, it'll be yourself. Brianna, would you like to come up and speak against the motion?
I don't think it's an extreme reaction. Firstly, because this is the celebration of somebody who is a direct descendant of those who were responsible for the slaughter of more than 30 million. And I think we can't ignore the ills of the past to be able to overcome them. I think this, by planting this tree as well, given the history, it can also be really alienating and uncomfortable for many of our students of colour. You've got to think about what this item what this planting this tree would represent, given the history. Like, we can't ignore it if we're going to be an anti-racist institution. So I think on behalf of all of those students, I'd like to put that forward. And instead, we're really wanting to plant a solidarity tree in celebration of other movements that we're doing. Like, don't get me wrong, I think she's a great person, like whatever, but given the historical meaning and the how much that can mean to a person of colour, this is my experience as a person of colour, it's detrimental. And also on your point about the Commonwealth not being associated in colonial projects necessarily, actually in New Zealand a lot happened after the Second World War, and that's still been going on today, so yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Lewis Telford to speak for the motion.
Save you some work. Thank you. Right then, it's been a bit more contentious than I thought it was. It's been mentioned by some that we don't have to plant one tree. If we push forward this motion, it mandates that we plant one tree specifically for the Queen. But the people who are going to be in charge of bringing that motion into action are, of course, the university and the SAB team. Now, I don't see why we have to consider whether we're planting a tree for the Queen or a tree for solidarity. If we push forward this motion, and we're going to put forward this single tree, you as a SAB team and a university could then motion and gather enough space to plant as many trees as you have space for. And now, if there is going to be an issue, if we plant a singular tree for the Queen, of seeing sort of NUSU is an institution that supports the monarchy solely, I can completely understand that. I can see where you're coming from. But there's no reason why that tree has to stand alone. We could plant a forest of trees if we get the amount of space, supporting various figures who we as the campus view as important. As a SAB team, once you take this motion forward, if you take this motion forward, it opens the door to do that. It opens the door. We're going to do one for the tree. You'll get some pushback from that, understandably, from a number of students. But you can respond to that rather than saying, well, we'll plant no tree or we'll plant a different tree. You can say, well, we'll plant additional trees. So we have trees that represent the views of everyone on our campus. There are some who support the monarchy. There's some who support various other figures throughout British society and other people throughout the world. I don't see why we would have to limit or choose trees as mutually exclusive. If we put forward this motion, the way I see it, it starts a trend, and you can continue that as you will. Thank you.
Thank you. As a sound test, Owen, can you tell us we have a breakfast?
Hello. For breakfast, what did I have for breakfast?
That's okay, we can hear you, that's fine.
Cow's chips. Oh, yay!
Okay, you have 2 minutes, Owen, to speak against the motion.
Oh, beautiful. Well, first of all, Liv stole most of my points anyway, but probably said them way better. Yeah, planting a tree for the Queen, contentious point? Yeah, pineapple on pizza's contentious. This is, I'd say, comparatively ridiculous. We can't be representing the views or the people at our university, which, by the way, is made up of a very large number of international students, not just British home students who are patriotic and all sovereign and such. It's a complete misrepresentation, and as Livia said, it brings back, we're trying to decolonize here. The Queen, being the head of the British Empire, is one of the, she is the absolute pinnacle, the image of colonization the world over. You know, the British Empire was the largest in history. We cannot really call ourselves a student society or a university that represents all of our students, or a society, or a student society that's trying to be anti-racist. You know, we had the vote on the Armstrong building, whether we should rename it, put a plaque, etc. Because the guy who the building is named after is related to the American Civil War, and selling arms to both sides. You know, it's a question of who are we leaving a legacy for? Today, it's 2021. Do we need more trees for the Queen? Or, I don't know, a good solidarity sounds amazing. Who should we be leaving a legacy for? Is it our students, our trailblazing students who are decolonizing and being anti-racist and doing absolutely fantastic things for progression and for student society itself? Or should we just go for the Queen again? You know, surely there's enough already. Surely we can make a bigger impact by uplifting and notifying someone smaller who is part of our student community now, rather than the Queen. That's my point.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Ilyas Saldahan to speak for the motion.
Thank you. I just have to say, to begin with, I had to come here because the chap with the microphone keeps putting faces and odd behaviour that, you know, shouldn't be doing that if people are speaking. You might not be able to tell I'm white-skinned, but I'm not originally from here ethnically. My parents are both born in Iraq, and there are a lot of people, I have to tell you right now, who are pro-monarchy, whether they come from previously colonised states. Iraq was ruled for 17 years after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and many of them were, despite what you might think, very fond of the Queen. She oversaw a time where the empire came to an end, and that's something we should be proud of. It's not something that we're trying to promote in terms of being full racism. This is, I think, what we meant by things being taken to an extreme. So let's be proud of that fall of the empire. Let's be proud of those who, whether they're in the monarchy or from without, they fought for this point in history. Nothing wrong with a tree. It's for the community. It's not just for the Queen. It's for the community. So yeah, just try to see it as that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite George Boatfield to speak against the motion.
You're doing a great job, Josh. My goodness. Yeah, all this about a tree, but it's not just a tree, it's a plaque. This motion is not about setting a trend, it's not about planting a forest, it's about getting a plaque for the Queen, and that's just hiding in broad daylight. Abby, Liv, Bree, Owen, you've all done a great job, so I've not really got much more to add other than that.
Thank you. I would like to invite Charlie Drake-Smith to speak for the motion.
So I think the first thing I'd say is that I think it's wrong to say that the British Empire and the Commonwealth are the same thing. I think that, over the last century there's been, decolonialisation, and the Queen has been the head of that. And I'd also say that I think that whatever, if you're going to plant a tree for a cause, there is always going to be opponents to that cause. So whatever you do, whether, I don't know what the other reason for planting a tree, but there might be some people who are against that. So whatever cause you plant a tree for, there's going to be problems with it. I think
it's only a tree. I mean, it's for the community, it's for conservation, it's for climate change. I think we can all agree that climate change is a big. I know it's one tree. It's not going to make a big difference to climate change, but I think that it should start if it's a forest and there's more trees. It's not just for the Queen; it's for the community, but it's also for climate change and conservation. So I think that's a worthwhile cause.
Thank you. George, could you edit your procedural motion with what your procedural motion actually entails before I can consider it, please? Before I move to the next against speaker, Fergus, you have a question?
Yeah, it's... Once again, I think I reiterate, George, I think you're doing a fantastic job with that. Yeah, just one more question for the previous speaker. I think it's quite interesting sort of what you take issue with in terms of what's being said, in terms of getting specifics on the Commonwealth of the Empire, when actually we're not. I think what we're taking issue with is the fact that I think it's almost we've been seen so often over recent months. It's sort of disregard or sort of brushing over.
Sorry, is there a question here?
There's a question coming. There's a question coming. For racism, we're seeing across the country things are just getting whitewashed, sort of blacked over. So I think, why is it that you're taking issue more so with sort of Commonwealth or Empire as opposed to actually standing up for racism and standing up for fact and not brushing over things that have actually happened in the past?
There could be a trait for anti-racism. I think what Lewis said about having trees for other causes, I'm not brushing under racism. I'm not saying whatever institution or other thing, there's always going to be problems with it, whatever institution. And I think that we could argue that maybe you are disregarding the positives of the monarchy. There's positives and negatives.
Thank you. The next against speaker is Renee Bennett. I'm not sure, I believe. Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead, you've got 2 minutes.
So I'd say that saying that it's just a tree is major oversimplification of the issue, and arguably the monarchy still stands for racism because there are still countries that are owned, quote unquote, by the British monarchy. So I feel like instead of just planting a tree in favor of the institution, how about we just plant a tree because it's good for the environment, which is, like, for example, I come from a country that's owned by the monarchy, and we've had history with slavery and all sorts of stuff. So just saying, like, diminishing the point that the Commonwealth versus monarchy or all the other stuff that I mentioned is just ignoring the actual history and significance of putting a tree in the institution. Yes, that is all I have to say.
Thank you. There is a point of information from Elliot.
I'd like to reiterate what I said in my proposed motion, though, which is that this isn't about the institution of the monarchy, which is obviously a lot more contentious than the tree. This is a personal creation of the Queen.
Alex Walker, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Renee Bennett. Which countries are still owned by the monarchy? I mean, no countries in history have been owned by the monarchy. I actually don't know what you're referring to today. I mean, I don't know.
Renee, if you want to respond to that, you can.
And have you heard of the Caribbean? Not to be like facetious, but like a lot of countries in the Caribbean are classed as British overseas territories. So I wouldn't say they're owned, that's why I said quote unquote. They're just still under the British monarchy, and our government is actually Britain. So it's like the empire is replaced, but it's still fair, in my opinion.
Just to have some clarity, from this point onwards, questions are meant to be in terms of the motion and its intent and around that, rather than challenging the details of for and against points. I've allowed it so far, but from this point onwards, if you can restrict questions to the motion and its intent rather than details of speakers. Alex, you have a point of information.
Well, I'll withdraw it in light of that.
Thank you.
clarification.
Okay. George Woods has proposed a procedural motion to remove references to the Queen's green canopy from this motion and to simply investigate the feasibility of planting more trees on campus. So this, I'm assuming, is a procedural motion to amend the current motion. Just give me a second to consider it. I know, it just depends on whether I think it's minor enough or major enough. Okay. I'm happy to accept that as a procedural motion, so how it generally works is the proposer, Elliot, you can either accept it as friendly and it will change, or not, and it'll be debated. Sorry, the question is, are you going to accept it as a friendly motion or a friendly amendment?
I'm allowed to give a bit of a reason why I believe. Okay, well, no, I don't accept it.
For the time being, do you accept it?
You can table another motion if you want, but you can't amend the motion. You can't amend the title of the motion.
Elliot, the question is yes or no?
No.
Okay, that's fine. George Wood would like to come up to propose your amendment, please. So just while George walks up to the podium, just for newer members. So what we're moving into now is the procedural motion part of this. So for all intents and purposes, we're disregarding the current debate of the original motion. I'm recommending this as a new motion with the resolves to be to amend the existing motion. And there was a lot of the word motion in the explanation, so hopefully it's clear. But for the time being, when we move to for and against, it should be around whether you believe this amendment is acceptable or not, rather than to the intent of the original motion. Once we've resolved this procedural motion, we then return to the original motion, be it amended or not. George, you've got 2 minutes to propose your amendment.
Great, thank you. I agree personally with the decolonisation aspect of the union. We can't really, it doesn't really suit it doesn't really fit the sort of current ethos of student culture and of the union in general. However, it's obvious to me that everyone who's spoken for or against this motion seems to be in support of planting trees in general. So in order to kind of unite the council on this issue, I think it makes sense to remove references from the royal family in general, specifically the Queen's Green Canopy project, from this motion, and simply rally the union to investigate planting more trees on campus as an environmental stance. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, stay on the podium, sorry. Laura, on the Teams call, would you please do me a favour and post this pure motion as a header text, just so it's clear. That way we move on to the procedural motion, and then we can move back to the original motion when we do that, please. That'd be great. Are there any questions for the proposer of the procedural motion, please? Owen, you have a question?
Hello, yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes? Yeah, question to George. Would it... So, yeah, the amendment is to remove all reference to the Queen's stuff and just plant trees. How do you think that might interact with Brianna's suggestion? And I don't know how much of a plan Brianna has on this, but to plant a solidarity, as she said, and an alternative. Do you think it would be better to hear Brianna's alternative suggestion and then see if there is scope for, as in like a general purpose as to why we should be modifying this motion? Yeah, so it's a kind of a request to give brief.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a good idea to listen to what everyone has got to say, including Bree here, and I certainly like the idea of having to coin a phrase, solidarity on campus, whatever that would entail. But I think from a sort of, as I said, from a point of unity amongst this council, regardless of the reason that we're planting trees, we should be planting trees. So I don't know if Brianna would be able to come and speak on her suggestion from earlier there, but I think it's definitely something that we could look at as a council.
You would do so as a for this motion rather than as a separate speech. I see no other questions, so thank you, George. I'd like to open up the floor for against and for speeches for procedural motion. I will give preference to the original proposers speak against the amendments if they wish to. Yep, would you like to? Well, Elliot.
Yeah, obviously, you're right in saying that there is, I think, consensus in planting trees. That's something we should be doing. My problem with this is that it is a bit of a wrecking amendment because the whole point of this motion is for the Queen's Jubilee specifically, and I think, it's right we should be having a vote on that. And then by all means at the next council, table another motion about planting trees on top of this regard, like you said, we can plant 28,000 trees if you want, one for every member of the union. But yeah, I think this is an issue beside this, and for the sake of unity, we should have a vote on this now, this contentious motion, have another vote in the future in which hopefully, there won't be as much, the argument won't be as heated as it is today.
Thank you. Somehow set my timer to count down from 99 hours. That would have been fun. Point of information from Olivia. Jackson is way.
Hi, so just in terms of the solidarity, obviously we don't have, because in this motion we don't know for definite where we'd be able to plant the tree. So the solidarity, we are for planting trees, but it would potentially be another one already outside there as a meeting point for all causes. So it wouldn't necessarily be planting loads more trees. I just want to clarify that in terms of, in case everyone's going to vote we want a solidarity, it may not necessarily be planting 10 more trees.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it depends. It's in the work.
Yeah.
Brianna, would you like to come up and speak?
Yeah. I guess I agree completely. As our colleagues over there have said, we know how much environment and sustainability matters right now, and I think the ethos of just planting trees for the environment, for Mother Earth, and for the sake of it is really nice, and it sends something that we can all get involved in. It doesn't necessarily have to be the sabbatical officers, but it could be a thing that we do together, and I think it's quite a nice idea and removes kind of the ties to racism that are in the original motion. Just a bit about the solidarity. As Liv said, it was going to be a meeting point. It was actually an idea spawned from the last sabbatical officers, but has been something we really wanted to implement as a meeting point, and also a place to tie messages, like little post-it notes, messages, standing in solidarity, and kind of a place to offload and come together and support, and a meeting point for rallies and events, and kind of just a nice little space where people can hang out. But yeah, we need trees for the environment, not to celebrate something that represents colonial ties, so.
Thank you. William Hayes, if you're wanting to submit a procedural motion, can you please edit your message to actually specify what your...
Sorry, repeat that.
Are you wanting to submit a procedural motion?
Yes.
Could you please edit your message to specify what your procedural motion is, so I can consider it?
Say that now, we should type it.
Just edit into the chat, please, so I can consider it. In the meantime, I'd like to invite Alex to speak against the motion.
Okay, so I'm sad that it's gone this way, and I'm a little bit disappointed in this council because we all feel very strongly about colonialism. We all view it as a terrible, terrible thing. We have different opinions on what is and what isn't emblematic of colonialism in the modern age. That's all fine. There is a place for that debate, and it's really important that that debate is had. This was a motion about planting a tree to honour Queen Elizabeth. I don't think that it should have been pulled into such a deep debate about colonialism. And I don't think it's fair to Elliot, who has prepared this motion, he believes in, to have it jumped on, and I like the idea of a solidarity. I don't think that's what this motion is about. This motion is about the Queen's Green Canopy. It should be voted on as the Queen's Green Canopy, and it should live or die on the benefits of that idea, not the benefits of other ideas.
Thank you. Kaylee, Fraser, you have a question?
Hi, I know you keep turning around saying you find it important to, plant trees in the end, which is fair enough, I completely agree. However, if you're willing to change it in the end, doesn't it just show that you're doing it for the plaque for the Queen, not for the tree itself?
Sorry, is there a question here?
Yeah, I'm saying, does it show that?
Oh, okay, sorry, Mike.
So, doesn't that show that you're just doing it for the plaque? Is that correct? Or does the tree matter because it just doesn't seem to, you know what I mean?
I am sticking up for what I think is an unfair treatment of this motion to the proposer who has written it. I'm all in favour of all trees. I'm also in favour of a tree for the Queen. I believe in a tree for the Queen. But the person who wrote this motion, and I know I put effort into motions I bring to this council, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes being invested in the subject. To have it turned into something else in council is blatantly unfair. It's unfair on people who devote their time to come here. It's really not fair. And it just can't be done, because what is the point of us all being here if a motion could just be transformed by someone else?
Livy, you're wanting to raise a point of order?
But we're having a debate. That's the point. I really appreciate you bringing it forward, but this is
Sorry,
council.
what point of order are you wanting to raise?
Just some clarity. Why are we complaining about no one's? No, it's democracy.
That's not one of the point of orders. Point of orders are acceptance orders.
Well, it's democracy.
I see no further arguments for the procedural motion, so we'll move on to a vote for the procedural motion. So to clarify, you're voting either. It's for and against again on the phone, isn't it?
Yes or no.
Yes. Okay. You're voting either yes to amend the motion to do the following that's on the screen behind me, which is to remove references to the Green Canopy and investigate feasibility of planting more trees, or you're voting no in order to maintain the original motion. You have approximately 30 seconds to vote on this once you see the thing on screen. Voting is now open. That's fine. Yeah, okay, I'm going to close voting there. And so that amendment is passed. So we are now returning to the original motion, but the original motion as amended by that procedural motion. So it'll be all the results of the original motion, but not in the context of the Queen's Green Canopy. I'm going to accept 2 against speakers for the motion as it currently stands. So I'm wiping the clean slate from the previous debate because it's a new motion now in effect. So I'm going to accept 2 more against speakers, 2 more for speakers, and then we will go to vote for this motion. So if you are wanting to speak against or for the motion, please, as it currently stands, you can please type it into the chat. I'd like to invite Alex Walker to speak against the motion, please. You've got 2 minutes.
Okay, so I want to reaffirm the point that I just made. Absolute clarity. I believe in planting trees. I believe in the ideas like the solidarity tree. I was personally thinking a tree for Martin Luther King because he's a university figure who fought racism that, you know, I'm very proud he's associated to this university. But a motion written about a national project and an international project to plant a tree for the 70th Jubilee, if that can be turned into a motion to look for places to plant trees generally, that's just not fair. That's not fair on the proposer who spent time on it. That's not fair on people who spoke on it before. It cannot be the way that it works. And you say that it's democracy. This is not the way it works in the House of Commons. Things do not just get changed just because. By procedural motions, things do not get totally transformed into completely different things. So I'm now going to be voting against this motion. I urge everyone else to as well, because at some point you have to draw a line in the sand and say, actually, we can't just change stuff on the floor, massively transform things. It's not the way this should work.
Thank you. Abby, you want to raise a point of information?
Because I know that the sound hasn't been great this evening, yeah?
I can hear you.
I just want to draw attention to the fact that it's a procedural motion which is a part of council that the chair of council has just agreed to. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware that what we're now voting on is to plant a tree, which I think was a far less contentious motion. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that because the procedural motion was put in place and that's something that's totally allowed in our council. So just your attention.
Thank you. Muslim, that comment was out of order. Please refrain from any degree of commentary, no matter how banterous in the chat. Thank you. So the next speaker will be for the motion, which I believe is Kaylee Fraser.
I'll just try and speak as quickly and as plain as I think. At the end of the day, like, everyone can clearly see it's about a plaque. If it wasn't about the plaque, they would have changed the motion really quickly to say, oh, let's all just plant a tree, which would be lovely. I also think it's unfair to say that, you know, you can come to council, but you can't expect motions to just go through without any debate. This is council, this is what we're here for, we're here to talk about these things. So I'm going to be voting for this amendment because I would like to see the solidarity tree. I think it's a really good idea, Brie. Because, you know, everyone likes trees. If you want a plaque, you can have a plaque, celebrate it in your own way, but I don't think it should be something that's on campus because, you know, it doesn't represent the values of the union.
Thank you. Apologies, William, I realise I didn't address your procedural motion. I consider the change to be significantly enough to not be within the original intent of the motion, so I'm not going to allow it. Question from Owen?
Hello, sorry again. This is a question to Bree and or Liv, whoever is more relevant, on the solidarity tree, as this motion is now being rebranded, maybe. Do you feel like passing this motion would be beneficial to the implementation of the solidarity tree, or should we just down it and let you guys do your own thing later?
Thanks, Owen. Yeah, I feel like if this motion goes through, it would be beneficial because it gives us that backing when we go to a state to get clearance, because the kind of issue we've been facing is that if they don't let us plant a new tree, we'd be happy to turn an existing tree into the solidarity, but our kind of ethos is to plant something new, start something afresh, and also put more trees into the environment and into our local community. So if it does go through, I definitely think it would help with our cause.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Ilias to speak against the motion.
Yeah, I study urban planning, so if the union wants, I'd be more than happy to help the real estate team get permission for planting more than one tree, if we are now going to move away from that. But the original motion was for the Jubilee, and that's been hijacked. So obviously disrespectful to the person that brought that motion forward. despite what you might think. But yeah, more than happy to plant more than one tree. If someone would like to put an amendment for that, we can have more than one tree. The real estate team could put that forward, and I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a point of clarity request from Lewis.
Yes, so my point of clarification from you is you've not accepted Will Hayes' procedural amendment because you've ruled that it's not within the original intent of the motion. But considering that an unfriendly amendment can exist, which goes against the original intent of the motion that Elliot put forward, how can a unfriendly amendment exist in a state where an amendment can't be put forward if it's against the original intent of the motion?
So to clarify the position the chair can take in terms of allowing or not allowing procedural motions to amend a motion, it is up to my judgment if I believe that the amendment is significantly altering the effect or intent. I do not consider the first procedural motion to be substantial enough to reject. I consider the second procedural motion, which for clarity was to essentially remove the motion from council and take it to a cross-campus ballot. I consider that to be substantial because you can do that anyway. You can organise a referendum as per the NUSU documents, and a referendum takes precedence over council, so it would overrule council decision, if my memory is serving correctly there. So I didn't see a need to debate that because you can just go ahead and do that yourself. There is a point of order from Elliot.
Sorry, I don't see how you could possibly argue that the motion wasn't substantial because it was the title of the motion was the Queen's Green Canopy. So you've changed the title.
Okay.
I don't think you get more fundamental.
Elliot, if you want to,
I don't know what the procedure is
Elliot,
in the House
yes.
of Commons that would be out of order.
Sorry, please don't speak over the chair. If you want to submit a procedural motion to overturn my ruling, that will be what you need to do at this point. So if you can type into the chat to submit a procedural motion to overturn my ruling, and then we'll go and debate that. If that's what you want to do. In the meantime, I believe we're on the final we've had the final against speaker. We're on the final for speaker, which is Abby Hutchinson, I believe.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to bring it back to what we now have as a procedural motion on just planting a tree. I just want to remind everyone that now it's about just planting a tree, and that is something that is great and really important and is something that we completely stand for, with having sustainable environment as one of our priorities this year as NUSU. So I just wanted to bring attention back to that and say there's only positive things that can come from planting trees, and I think that we should just all vote on that now.
Thank you. And indeed, on that note, we will move to the votes. Once the PowerPoint is ready. Yep, so this is the motion. This is the vote, rather, on the resolves of the motion, sans participation within the Queen's Green Canopy project. So voting is open now. We've got about 30 seconds.
Iris, I'm a bit confused as to what we're voting on here.
The vote is on the motion as included in the motion's document, sans inclusion in the Queen's Green Canopy project. And I'll just scroll up back to the motion. And to investigate the feasibility of planting more trees on campus, if that helps.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
The motion you're voting on is the motion as it stands in the motion document, with the additional amendment of there is no participation within the Queen's green canopy, and the motion is also to investigate the feasibility of planting more trees on campus. I'll allow another 20 seconds just because of that need for clarity, and then we'll close voting there. If you want to put your hand up, and Nat will attempt to intervene if Nat can. We're just awaiting on a few more votes from a couple of attendees who had connection issues. I believe that's resolved now, and they're just submitting their votes. And once that's happened, we'll close it. Okay, if you want to close the votes there, please. And that motion has passed. Congratulations. Okay, so the motion section of council is now concluded. We move on to the elections for positions elected for council. And the first one we will move on to is disciplinary committee. I'd like to invite Alex Wong-Evans, the chair of scrutiny, to say a few words on disciplinary committee and why you should get involved.
Hi, I would really like to fill this last place in the disciplinary committee. It's important the committees, I have a full committee to pick from. It's quite an important committee, helps decide, votes on disciplinary matters. So yeah, if you're interested in those sort of things, if you're interested in holding officers and other people accountable, then please apply for it. I'd like it filled. Thank you.
Thank you. If you wish to put yourself forward to the disciplinary committee, please can you type your name into the chat along with the word disciplinary. George, would you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly, you say that, in your scrutiny and disciplinary report, you say you'd be looking to give a clearer and more distinctive purpose because this committee seems to be somewhat obsolete. I was wondering if you'd clarify that because it's quite relevant to this.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So currently at the moment with the way I'm currently looking at the disciplinary motions. It's like the what's the word? I think they basically lays it out, and I think the disciplinary committee currently needs like clearing up because currently most of its powers have been absorbed by scrutiny. I'm going to try and give some of them back to the disciplinary committee.
I will give the attendees 15 seconds to consider their role and whether they want to put themselves forward for the final position. Okay, there are no nominees for the disciplinary committee. The next position is Welfare, Campaigns and Liberation Executive. I would like to ask Olivia if she can chair this, as I am intending to put my name forward for it. Because I forgot to last time.
Thanks. Connor, are you going to guide me again?
Yeah, there's a script. You got a script.
Oh, brilliant.
So we're going to ask Bree to explain.
Just we're going to ask Bree to explain, say a few words on why students should get involved, please, since you chair this one.
All of the execs are really important, but I feel right now welfare is a particularly important kind of issue that people are going through. I think it's safe to say the last 18 months have been really difficult, but by being part of this executive, you could be a crucial person in ensuring people's recovery is better and looking out for students. As I explained during the last council, the Welfare and Liberations and Campaign Executive is a great place to bounce ideas, talk about current events that are going on and how we're going to respond to those, and make sure that student voice is heard, especially given that mental health is a huge thing we're working on this year. And as Abby said before, we're leading, and I'm on the steering committee as well for the new mental health charter. So I think it's a really crucial opportunity to have your perspectives and insights feed into university work and also be a bigger part of the wider community. For instance, the work we're doing about spiking, that's become a much larger piece of work aimed on legislation and policy, but by being part of these executive meetings, you can have a say in that and also be a part of the solution. So I think the more great minds we have in these spaces, the more diverse minds we have in these spaces, the better, because we can make more change. And I guess we're all here for change, so yeah, it would be great if you'd like to be part.
Thanks for that. How long do I leave? About 30 seconds. So if you would like to put yourself forward, would you be able to put your name in the chat? I'll give everyone 30 seconds to do that. Harris, could you set me the timer? Thank you. I'm just being thick, don't worry. I'm going to take it that that's as many as we're getting. I'll say that's closed. Was I right with that? Yeah. Sorry. Been a long day. So we've got 2 of those spaces there. If there are no oppositions to those, then those have all passed. If there's any oppositions to that, sorry. No, they're all good. Congrats, both of you, and you'll see Brie at the next one. Woo!
Thank you, Olivia. Okay, so now we move on to student notices. So if any student wishes to speak to make an announcement, if you can type F into the chat, and I will give the floor to you to make an announcement. Kelly Fraser.
I'm sorry that it's not one, but for the career I do this section called Campus Spotlight, and basically it's just kind of like every week or so I just spotlight one thing on campus, usually it's societies, just to kind of spread the word out. If everyone knows anyone who'd like to get involved, it's kind of like an interview thing, and just let me know and send me an email or message.
Thank you. Olivia and Brianna. Thought you were going to dance then.
Is it for the march? No. My laptop's died, and so is Bree's. But it's just a little reminder for everybody that it happens here at holding a march in solidarity for survivors and victims of sexual assault and sexual misconduct and all those awful things. So if anyone wants to get involved, they are making banners from 6 p.m. At the Students' Union, and then at 9 p.m. under the arches. And if we get a tree, they would be able to meet next to the Solidarity tree. And they'll be meeting there, taking their banners, and it's also joining with Northumbria. And then at Monument, they'll be meeting, and there'll be speeches, demonstrations, and it'll be really great to see a lot of friendly faces there. Yeah. It's on Thursday. Yeah, I did say the date. Thursday. I won't be there because I do have a genuine reason. Me and Abby are in London for a conference thing, but we'll be making a banner and all that jazz.
Yeah,
You,
and
you may have just done this, but Owen wants to clarify which day. What was the date, sorry?
So Thursday from 6 p.m. banner making, and then 9 p.m. the march starts at the Archers. Sorry, my brain's gone.
But if you're worried and you don't know anyone there and you want some friendly faces to go with, Eleanor, gosh, I'm tired as well, man. Eleanor and I will be there as well, so feel free to come along with us. The only other announcement I had is it is Shag Week, so that's, before the name gets a bit alarming, that's Sexual Health and Guidance Week. There will be STI testing in Luther's from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day this week. There's a competition running for societies, so if you go and say whatever society you're in, you can get a tally on the dashboard, and whichever society or club has the most STI tests wins £150 for them, which is real nice. But you don't have to be part of a society to go. You can just go on and get checked. So yeah, and there'll be lots of information online, kind of just to break the stigma around STIs, because it can be really scary and it can also feel gross, but it shouldn't, because it's natural. And yeah, just information about what to do, where you can go, the different types of STIs and STDs and things. So yeah, enjoy Shag Week.
Thank you. Owen Lukens.
Hello. Can I just check, was Kaylee before me, or?
Kaylee was twice before you. Kaylee was before you, before Bree. Yes, is the answer.
Oh, fair enough. Oh, sorry, yeah. Cool. The RAG Society, the Rosie and Jimmy Society, is having a Christmas bingo on the 13th of December to raise money for a fantastic charity. I can't specifically remember which, but it'll be a good one. Yeah, come along. It's Christmas jumper themes. You can dust them off and get rather drunk in the venue, or not, also an option. Yeah, 13th of December. Come along.
Thank you. Jack Train.
So I'm usually behind the camera, not in front of it, but I just want to do a massive shout out saying that Electro Engineering Society has re-established itself. It's just been re-ratified for anyone interested in electro engineering, want to get involved in networking or anything. It's only £6 membership, and we do amazing socials. Come along if you want to get involved.
Lizzie Mead.
Hello, I would just like to announce, speaking as head of current affairs here, that if you're interested in getting involved with student media in any capacity, whether that be the Courier, NUTV, or NSR, we are still doing our student media afternoons at 1:30. Thank you. Oh, yes, 1:30 each Wednesday, not every day, sorry.
And finally, on that note, George Butfield.
Yes. Okay. So following on from Elizabeth's talk about student media afternoons, we just had Fight Night, first time since the pandemic, which went very, very well indeed. It was a really fun event. Next one is on the 2nd of December, for anyone who wants to get involved in punditry, presenting, hosting, and crew, and filming it. Yeah, thank you.
And the final item on the business is the open debate, which I think we have time to do a short couple of minutes one. So this is part of council for those of you who are new, where we basically, this is kind of indicative of kind of opinions and stuff and talking about subject. So the open debate topic is, what are your experiences of blended learning? I don't know, Olivia, if you want to, either Olivia or Eleanor, if either of you want to introduce. I think this was your idea, steering. Yeah, would you like to come to the podium and...
I just feel like I've been too gobby this council.
You've been contributing in the way which you should do as a sabbatical officer, yes.
I think. So basically, this was a little bit just, I thought it would be a topic that everyone will be able to contribute to, as the majority of students have some form of blended learning, some form of blended, I mean, even if it's just in new societies or things like that. So the idea is just to get some opinions. It's also, I'll be honest, it's a little bit selfish of me because it helps me make sure I'm telling the uni what students want. When they ask me how things are going, it means that I can go to them with actual accurate information rather than like what I get from a few different people. Or I have asked all of the school reps these things a few times, but it's just a chance if anyone's got anything they really want to talk about, and then it means I've got it in the back of my mind at all the meetings that we're going to. Yeah.
Thank you. If you wish to speak, just want to type a Q into the chat if you've got any points you wish to offer. I'll give 20 seconds, otherwise I'll assume there are no points to offer. Oh, points. Lewis Telford.
So I've kind of had a mixed experience of blended learning since I'm doing history and politics, so I go across 2 departments. Within history, I've not seen it so much because I'm third year, so specialist subjects, you don't really, they haven't really done blended learning as much. Just sort of send you off to do your reading, then they pull you in for a seminar. Politics, though, I've seen more issues in that it's being used more as a replacement rather than an addition on top. So the issue that I'm seeing is they're kind of using blended learning as an excuse to give us less contact hours at the end of the day. So what I would love blended learning, I love the idea of being able to have sort of a video or lecture there, provided that I can go over and just keep doing. I think in second year, there was a great module that did this, that had online materials even before we went online by Philip Garrett in the history department, and it's absolutely fantastic having these online materials like podcasts and videos, but that should be in addition to contact hours. It should not be a replacement of, which is unfortunately what I'm seeing some departments in the university do.
Thank you. Owen Lukens.
Hello, yeah, sort of, echo the last speaker. I feel like the movement from obviously normal and then suddenly online, and now we're sort of feeding back into, I don't know about anyone else, but I'm mostly in person. It seems that we've just again lost any and all flexibility that we had. Obviously we had no flexibility going into the COVID pandemic, but surely this has taught us that everybody learns differently, because considering the vastly different outcomes that people have found during the pandemic. And yeah, it seems kind of counterproductive that certainly my school of natural environmental science is just offering no flexibility in how we learn. And I feel like the blending of learning is more to fit lecturers and their availability, whether they want to do things online or not even synchronous or in person. It doesn't, I feel like any changes made is really for the benefit of the students and doesn't acknowledge how different students learn. I.e. some people would rather turn up to every single lecture in person, whereas some people would just prefer to rely on recordings because that is how they've lived for the last year and a half, and that's how they just succeed, really.
Thank you. Lizzie Mead.
Personally, I believe that blended learning has had really positive outcomes for some students, but negative outcomes for others. On one hand, I do think it's important that students who, for whatever reason, feel are unable to attend in person or feel unsafe attending in person should be able to have the option of studying remotely. And I think it's good that we're still making that option available for a lot of courses. That said, I do think that there is sort of a compromise to the teaching with remote learning, because it's still something which is somewhat new. And of course you have all of the same issues with technical difficulties and with the lecturers not being as familiar with the techniques of that sort of teaching as opposed to the in-person teaching they've been doing for most of their careers. That said, I do think that we are right to not go straight back to everything being in person, because there could always be problems coming from that.
Thank you. I'll take a last point from William Hayes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm a big fan of in-person learning, always have been, always quite liked education, always loved school, love university, and not necessarily just for the educational reasons, actually because, I'm a collectivist and a communitarian, I enjoy people, I enjoy being part of something, being part of an institution, and, for one's soul and spirit, it is much, much, much more healthy, I think, for our university as a broader aspect of society to be interacting with our lecturers, whatever, and I think it would create a happier campus. Encourage people to go out, make new friends, engage with things, perhaps encourage them to be more a more active participant. It's quite easy, as I'm sure we all know, to just zone out on Zoom and not really give a fig about what's going on. Secondly, I can only speak for the politics department, but if each one of my modules has a Q&A or a tutorial, which is essentially a seminar, you can understand why you could do it in person quite normally because it's a very small group. You can space the room out, open the windows, whatever. These Q&As are the size of lectures. There's not even veiled reason or veiled excuse not to do lectures. If you're holding these Q&As and tutorials with 50 people in a room, do a lecture. I mean, I appreciate what I can't remember who it was that said it, but I appreciate this idea about it just being to lecturers' timetables. I don't want to be too cynical, but if you're doing these big group sessions, I think the university and the schools and departments should just go whole hog and get on with it. My view.
Thank you. And with that, I'll conclude the open debate. And just before I close the second Council of the Year, I just want to remind everyone to please throw away your paper plates if you have one nearby, and also your cups as well. The first 20 people to reach corner, vote by all means, please do not swamp him. Do so in a gentle and approachable manner. Can grab a drinks voucher to be claimed at Luther's. A reminder once again that the deadline for submitting motions for the final council of this calendar year and this semester is this Friday at 10 a.m. And the next council is on the 9th of December. Thank you, everyone.
Great holiday to everyone.
No, there's no worth £2.